All right, welcome back. Of course, it's still Rise and Shine Daily. And that report talked about the fact that Nigerians are complaining about the situation in which they are. There's no fuel, there's hike in food prices, and it is not really going down well with a lot of Nigerians. And of course, I'm happy that we brought that report because it lays the foundation for our focused conversation this morning. We're looking at how we will be going forward in 2022 in terms of the government trying to curb the poverty rate that we have experienced the past few years. But joining us on the conversation this morning, we have Comrade Iboro Ibara, who is the Vice Chairperson, Nigeria Labour Congress, Akwa Ibom State Chapter. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. So glad to be here.
Thank you very much for coming. And I think the first question, yes,
supposed to say Happy New Year.
The first question Uyai likes to ask our guests is, I think he's the second guest on
we're having a set
for the new year. But there's one question Uyai likes asking our guests. How was your journey to Ibiakuran?
In one word, I don't think I can manage it in one word. It was stressful.
Yeah.
And we wish it would be different in 2023.
Absolutely.
You know, we were here 2 years ago, and last year, and this year. That's a period of time. So there should be some improvement, reasonable improvement.
Okay.
So we pray that takes place in 2023.
Yeah. Okay, just to, so that you can relate to why Comrade is saying that the roads leading to our station is in worse than a deplorable state.
Yeah.
And like you rightly said, the word to describe it is stressful getting into this place. But welcome nonetheless, and a very happy new year to you.
Thank you very much.
But was it worth it? Or is it worth it?
Oh, wow. Excuse me. I'm so delighted, I have not been in this studio before.
Oh, yeah.
So I was looking forward to being here. So it helped to mitigate the stress of the journey. So I'm excited to be here.
That's the part we really like. Once you come into our facility, you forget the roads.
Yeah, definitely.
You absolutely forget the roads. But that's good to hear. But on the heels for the conversation we're having this morning, we just celebrated this morning the fact that President Muhammadu Buhari has signed into law the appropriation bill for 2023. And, that is saying a lot because we're talking about poverty and we're talking about monies being signed to take care of the needs of certain sectors and departments across the whole country for the next couple of years. But we've also seen that 133 million Nigerians are living in abject poverty. Although Nigeria and other African nations had a project to take their citizens out of poverty, we rather saw more people go beneath that line. Overall, what are your thoughts about the conditions of Nigerians in terms of poverty? What would you say are the causative factors?
Well, I think that is why the National Bureau of Statistics, in the last report it brought out, decided to call it multidimensional poverty.
Yeah.
Because the factors that are responsible are multidimensional.
Yeah.
Okay, for instance, in the northern part of the country where the incidence is higher, like you said, there are 133 million Nigerians, which is approximately 63%.
Yeah.
That's close to 2 out of every 3 Nigerians.
Yeah.
So we're thinking of 2 out of every 3 Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. So the factors include security shocks, like in the Northeast, okay? Food insecurity, like in the Northwest, and of course we understand that in those 2 instances, the background is the conflict. And when you come down south, unemployment is one of the driving factors when you come to the southern part of the country. So the factors are multidimensional. That's why it is called National Bureau of Statistics called it Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index, which actually was an excellent piece of job by that agency, being that prior to that time there was paucity of data that can be used, because if you're thinking of making plans to curb the incidence of poverty, then you actually need data to be able to make your plans realistic. So the factors would be quite, there would be a long list if we had to go into it. The lack of basic infrastructure is also a factor, because the supply chain, okay, includes everything. If you take farm produce, for instance, and you have to move those farm produce from the farm gate to the final consumer, then of course you have to deploy transportation. So if the transport infrastructure is not well positioned in the country, it is going to be a constraint. So there are a whole lot of factors, and of course you would would be able to identify some aspect of negligence on the part of quite a whole number of stakeholders in the chain, not only the government and its agencies, but a whole lot of others. So it's a sad scenario, which may not actually brighten up in the coming days, considering the scenario in the fuel price, the energy price sector, and considering the recent outbreak of COVID in China, which has led to restrictions in about 19 countries globally so far, and the persisting war in Ukraine also has its spin-offs and trickle-down effects, and then you have our internal war, which is being fought in the northeast, and it has even spread to the northwest, okay? And then also climatic factors like the flooding, those ones are factors you cannot directly control, but you can mitigate. And those are the factors that interplay, and the resultant is what we call poverty, which everyone is actually beginning to feel in one way or the other.
Okay, let's even look at 2022 now, because this is more in retrospect. Okay, when you say that somebody like the president of the Federal Republic is saying that, look, I did my best for Nigerians, okay, and so much was sunk into the agricultural sector. We also had CBN dish out a lot of schemes for farmers and all of that. So one would expect, that we shouldn't be sitting here and talk about multidimensional poverty for Nigerians. But in an overview, how do you think that we fared in terms of this poverty lines in 2022? Did we fare well, or we didn't fare well at all?
Well, I think we could look at personal perspectives, which also will give a coloration to maybe regional perspectives. At a personal level, I do not think my living standard improved over the course of 2022. Okay, so you could use a lot of parameters. It may not be professional. It may not be the technical parameters that are deployed, but in a personal capacity, if you ask me personally, I do not think my living standard improved. I think it deteriorated in the course of 2022. So the statistics that are available, okay, because the 2022 report on the multi-dimensional poverty index, okay, actually came out at a time the budget had gone on for some time, and the 400 billion naira additional injection into the National Poverty Eradication and Growth Strategy, which council is headed by the vice president. Now that was about the second quarter, end of the second quarter, about June. But this report came out about the third quarter, the last quarter.
The last quarter of the year.
And one would have expected some improvements, okay, over this period. But we cannot really have that direct comparison, because this report came out in 2022, and we do not have a report for 2021 on which to base our comparison. But then, between January 2021 and December 2021, January 2022 and December 2022, we've seen a deterioration in the value of the naira. we've seen a spike in the rate of inflation such that by the end of the third quarter, the National Bureau of Statistics made us understand that this is the highest in 17 years. Since 2005, we've not had this level of inflationary pressure in the economy. So these are indices to show that living standards worsened, that the poverty rate actually deteriorated. You now asked, in spite of all the efforts by the government,
Yes.
between the passage, between the passage of the budget, like has been done and it's signing into law, and the actual release of the funds and the actual deployment of the released funds, because the funds have to be released after the approvals have been made, and then the projects for which the funds are to be dispensed on have to be, the contractors have to be sought for. And I mean, you could have components of that project that have to be imported, and all those time lags made it such that there was not much impact felt from government's poverty eradication programs. That's my view. And I think it tells us in with all the facts on the table, with the economic indices that we have on the table. So by June, the Council of the National Poverty Eradication and Growth Strategy had its meeting and said, okay, 400 billion has been approved, 350 to the humanitarian ministry, and 50 billion to be deployed in the Ministry of Agriculture, rural roads, and then new technology, what do you call it, clean energy projects. That was June. I mean, it's not very
okay. So there's another angle that the government has also been hampering on the fact that they've been able to come up with different social net programs. I know that what's his name now, one of our guests on the show, okay,
That'll be Harudo.
Yeah, Harudo, once said that even the one that happened in Akwa Ibom State was a total flop. Okay, but government has ruled out some of these poverty eradication programs. We have N-Power, and we also have the school feeding program, which was to take a lot of young children out of the streets into schools and all of that. But aside from that, we've had other ones. So why hasn't this in a way been able to cushion the effects and reduce the statistics of the people living under the poverty line in Nigeria? Because we are going into 2023, the budget has been reeled out, and for agriculture they said that they are going to be giving 248.3 trillion naira. So if we do not talk about those things, what effect will we be having if this kind of money is being injected into the agricultural sector again? So that means we'll come and sit down here and still be talking about more Nigerians being under the poverty line.
Well, I think there is the need to also look beyond the figures. Now, the population of Nigeria is growing. So we also have to bring that into perspective. Okay, so the number of school children being enrolled, must grow alongside, the growth of the population. Now, our efforts at stemming poverty would have to outpace the population growth. You already have a large number of people that are poor, 2 out of every 3, because 63 and 66 is very close. So almost 2 out of every 3 Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. And what that means is that this number of people either do not have access to water and sanitation facilities, or because the multidimensional index that was deployed by the National Bureau of Statistics is very different from the poverty, monetary poverty index, which is deployed by the World
Bank.
Okay, so you could be monetarily not poor, but you do not have access to safe drinking water. So I think the index that was deployed by the Bureau is more robust. So now, government needs to do more. It doesn't mean that what government has done, I said in 2022, it may have been policy delays, delays in the implementation of policy. In 2023, I do believe that the impact is going to be felt more, because the spade work would have been done, okay, and then everyone is like going to the field in 2023. So, but I think the government needs to do more, not only in terms of these what do we call it, redistributive programs, you know, and social safety programs, the farmer money, market money, you know, and all those ones. If you look at the World Bank recommendations, the World Bank feels that these social safety programs is one of the things the government needs to do. But the government also needs to undertake structural changes, and structural changes could be very wide ranging, you know, could be very deep. For instance, the subsidy program.
Yeah.
For instance, so can we look at a restructuring of the subsidy program? You know, when the word restructuring is used, it's in very broad terms. It could mean complete, you know, ousting of that program. It could also mean redesign of that program. Because honestly, if you look at what we spend on the subsidy program alone, and you look at what we require, what was injected into the poverty program for 2022 was 400, you know, billion. So it doesn't even it's not even up to what was spent for fuel importation in 1 quarter of the year. I think for the third quarter, you know, energy imports gulped up to 25% of Nigeria's imports, and out of this, fuel importations, PMS, premium motor spirit, I think it took up to 17% of total imports. So now when you break that down, it comes to over 1 trillion naira, almost 1.2 trillion naira in only one quarter of the year, the third quarter.
Yeah.
So, and what did we try, what were we looking for to inject for our poverty eradication programs? 400 billion naira for the entire year. So you could now see that if the subsidy program, you know, comes to an end, I mean, you have so much money which you can inject into poverty reduction. But there is also the counter argument.
Exactly.
You know, that if the subsidy program is scrapped, then Nigerians wouldn't be able to survive, because the cost of the fuel will drive up the cost of living, which is equally true. So how do we get out of it?
But aside from that argument, there's another argument, that even if the subsidy is totally removed and Nigerians are buying fuel for so much of a price, the monies that the government is saying that let us take out this subsidy and inject into infrastructural development will not at the end of the day be injected. These monies will be embezzled by the so-called politicians. So why now take this subsidy away for it to be embezzled rather than put it so that Nigerians can have fuel at very subsidized prices?
Which brings to the point that corruption is a big part
problem
of why we are in the poverty square.
Of course, you know, I took up of time to look at some aspects of the subsidy program. I was alarmed when I saw a news item that the country spent 1.19 trillion naira on fuel imports for the third quarter of last year. So I was like, what's going on? And I now looked at the figures for the third quarter of 2021 and third quarter of 2020, which was the COVID-19 year. And you would be amazed that what was spent for fuel imports for the third quarter of 2020 with the COVID-19 restrictions on movement was higher than what was spent for fuel imports in the third quarter of 2019, when the restrictions had not come. So how come that Nigerians, how come that Nigerians ended up driving more vehicles during the lockdown than they did when there was no lockdown? How come the population of vehicle owners in the alternative, you know, shot up so sporadically when the ports were closed and the vehicles were not even coming in from China and elsewhere? So those are the kind of questions that make ordinary Nigerians to cast doubt on the integrity of the subsidy program. A lot of people have said that the subsidy program is a fraud. A whole lot of people have said so.
Okay, so something else we want to look at, just as we wrap up, are what kinds of solutions can you project for us to be able to leave this place? Especially because apart from waiting for Nigeria as a nation, the federal government to do something, what can citizens do differently? Like you said, the appropriation bill has been signed, but there's a whole gap to implementation. What are the solutions that we can generate and have on ground at this time for us to have a good year as Nigerians?
Okay. Basically, one of the things that government tries to do the world over when it tackles poverty is to look at the income gap. There could be a whole lot of Nigerians that are, feeding off, on the rest of us. So we have a personal identification number, the PIN number, and we can also have a property identification number, okay, so that we could map all the properties that we have, all these exotic houses that we have, and exotic boats and aircraft and all that, so that government can begin to extract tax. Because if you go to other countries, luxury taxes are a source of huge revenue for the government. So we have to look at, the place imposing taxes on these luxury items on the people that are so wealthy, because I think the scenario in Nigeria is that the people on the lower rungs of income are paying more tax than the people that are up there. I'm talking about personal income tax now. So we could introduce dimensions of taxation that will make the wealthy to pay more tax. That would be a way of redistributing income. And then, of course, a whole lot of other things that would need to be done would depend on the government we have in 2023, the new government that would come in 2023. I am of the Nigeria Labour Congress, so of course, my sympathies. And Nigerians can actually, sit down to ask themselves questions on where we need to be in 2023 and beyond. We need the level of capacity that can only be offered by the youth of the country, because actually the youth own the country. They make up the larger chunk of the population when you look at the
Productive
the
age.
Population characteristics of the country. They make up the productive sector. Okay, so it's unreasonable for you to say that they should not produce somebody from their ranks or close to their ranks to lead the country. It doesn't sound reasonable. If you look at France, you look at the whole countries, a lot of countries in Europe and the world over. In Ukraine, you don't see septuagenarians holding out as the heads of a whole lot of countries. You discover that there is a tendency for choosing people that have both the mental and physical capacity that can contend with the modern realities of statehood.
Okay, so just to touch down a little bit on the NLC, we have policies in the NLC that, sometimes also fight the livelihood of people working, in these sectors. Like the NLC now is a union for people working in Nigeria. Just over the Christmas season, there was a back and forth on, oh, we are going to really increase salaries. Oh, we did not say we are going to increase salaries. What is the, overall activity of the NLC at this time in preparation for the new work year? Of course, we're talking of how the welfare and the life of people generally will be helped in 2023.
For the Nigeria Labour Congress, of which by the special grace of God I am the vice chairperson in the Akwa Ibom State Council, even though that status may soon change.
Okay.
Going into 2023. For the Nigeria Labour Congress, 2023 is also an election year.
Okay.
So, and our election is in the form of the National Delegates Conference. So, the policy roadmap for the Congress for the next, season of 4 years is going to be defined by the National Delegates Conference. So a whole lot of resolutions are going to be taken, and I think that should come by the second month of the year. So that is going to give a roadmap, to what Labour feels about the economy and all, and it is going to be made very public. So I think the National Secretariat of the Nigeria Labour Congress is already on, on its toes, working to make sure that that roadmap is delivered to Nigeria. But prior to this time, the Nigeria Labour Congress had already come up with what it's known as the Charter of Demands, which actually streamlines what the ordinary worker, and we could also say the ordinary worker is the ordinary Nigerian,
yes,
wants from each, from whatever government comes in. So that Charter of Demands has been presented to all the political parties, to forward to their aspirants, presidential aspirants, gubernatorial. In Akwa Ibom State, we've done that for the gubernatorial aspirants, and we place a demand on them to sign onto that charter. Okay, citizens want our school systems to be computerized. Okay, because you cannot talk about education in the global context without having children that are ICT
compliant,
literate. So we have that charter. So that is one of the ways in which the Nigerian Labour Congress is trying to engage, the government of the day and the political gladiators in order to provide a more venerable, livelihood situation for the citizens of Nigeria. So
yeah, I just have to quote you, sorry, because our time is up.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you asked that question, because when we're talking about poverty in Nigeria, the Labour Congress cannot be exonerated
Absolutely
from it, because they are the ones that are pushing the demands of workers in general, to the government. And we have over the years seen a situation where the Labour, Congress, or the Labour unions now, in terms of playing their unionism, they say that they get to collect envelopes and not push the demands proper. So it's more like they back and back and back, but do not bite. But that's going to be a conversation. Okay, we hope so, and we pray so. That's a conversation for another time. But thank you so much, Comrade Boro Ibarra, Vice Chairperson, Nigeria Labour Congress, Akwa Ibom State Chapter. Thank you so much for coming on set, and thank you so much for sharing your opinion with us on the topic today.
It was good to be here.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so because of time, we'll just take our quote of the day, and that's how we wrap things up on Designed. Our quote of the day says, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. Alan Kay, scientist. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. So let's begin to invent policies, good policies that will take us further and give us a better future as Nigerians.
Yes, well, inventing the future that you want to see, now is the best time to start.
So
today,
when you don't have the capacity to invent,
We'll build
I
the
think you can also,
capacity.
build the capacity is one thing, but finding someone who has the capacity to build and join yourself with that person is another thing that we should do.
So you're preaching partnerships.
Yes. Strategy
Collaborations.
Strategy is a lot of, makes the whole difference in the cycle of life that we're going. If you can, someone else can join yourself to them, and let's all just move forward. Well, but that's basically how much we can take on today's show. Thank you so much for being a part of our show today. To everyone who called in on the show, we do appreciate you. My name is Uya Anyekara, and it was a great time with you this morning. Definitely see you tomorrow.
Yes, we'll definitely see you tomorrow again for another edition of Rise and Shine Daily. My name is Janice Cobbleman. This is me saying thank you to Comrade Boro Ibarra for coming again. And of course to all the production team. You guys are doing a great job. Thank you so much, and see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Spectrum TV.
Broadening your horizon.